Stacey Abrams never accepted the results of her 2018 election. Hillary Clinton said Russia stole the 2016 election. Democrats denied the 2000 elections. Democrats denied the 2004 elections.
You're letting him ramble on with these talking points that you could pull out of a Cracker Jack box.
So apparently J.D. Vance is in trouble because he wouldn't parrot the talking point the journalists forced him to say, which is that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Why are they so obsessed with the 2020 election? They're more obsessed than Donald Trump is, to tell you the truth. You know, listen, if Donald Trump in his heart of hearts believes that that election was conducted in an illegal fashion, and I got to say there's a lot of evidence that extraordinary rules were broken and changed and modified at the last minute for the pandemic there in certain states that really did tell the outcome, then of course he's going to think that that election, you know, is going to stick in the back of his head as a problem. The fact that they're forcing J.D. Vance, that they want to demonize him if he doesn't parrot exactly what, you know, Jake Tapper demands that he says about the 2020 election is such a non-issue. The American people don't care about it. And the only way to deal with this is the way Ryan Girdusky dealt with it on CNN. Take a look at Ryan. He just absolutely hammers this home.
Ryan, what's your thought?
This is just ridiculous because I'm sorry, Stacey Abrams never accepted the results of her 2018 election. Hillary Clinton said Russia stole the 2016 election. Democrats denied the 2000 elections. Democrats denied the 2004 elections. Every election Democrats don't win. They kick and stamp their feet. They sit there and they say it's stolen. They say we need to pack the Supreme Court, make Puerto Rico and DC a state, make sure that other voters are disenfranchised, give citizenship to illegal aliens, making sure Americans' votes counts for less. They don't listen. If you're going to care, I care about democracy. I care about democracy.
You don't care much.
I care about keeping it. Yeah, I do clearly because I support Stacey Abrams.
Not that
Ryan, they don't march in DC, Ryan. Like that's the difference, right? Like you're pointing to, I agree with you. Hillary Clinton said that. Stacey Abrams said that. You know what they didn't do? They didn't organize a rally. They didn't tweet about it. Peter Navarro didn't tweet about it. They didn't have all of these other subsidiary people organize an event. Like look, this is not rocket science. It happened. The revolution was televised. We all saw it that day of what happened. Like, I agree with you that the American people want to move on from that. But if you can't acknowledge that it happened, how can we move on from something? If you can't meet me in the middle of the sky and the sun is yellow, how are we supposed to have a conversation?
I completely agree with you. January 6th was horrible and it was disgusting. Nonetheless, and yet still, if you care about the institution of democracy, Democrats have been disenfranchising it for 20 years since the Bush election.
That's a complete lie.
They said Ohio was stolen in 04.
When you get finished with your
talking point. Hold on. Don't talk over each other. Van, finish your point.
Yeah, they're not talking over each other. Van Jones is talking over him. And that's when you know they don't like what you're saying when you're telling the truth. But of course, we do know that ever since the George Bush election in 2000, they have been undermining the electoral process at any chance they get. That's why they keep saying, let's do away with the Electoral College, right? And you don't think that doesn't undermine our process? It undermines our Constitution? It does on a regular basis. So, of course, Van Jones has to talk over him and interrupt him.
But you're letting him ramble on with these talking points that you could pull out of a Cracker Jack box. Listen.
Pull out of a Cracker Jack box. Okay, Van. Listen, they are in trouble. They are desperate. And let me explain to you why you're starting to see this conversation about January 6th all over again. And by the way, real fast, this whole, he started a revolution and it was televised and Donald Trump led the insurrection. Anytime you're hearing that from your friends or if they're saying it on your Facebook page or whatever, just say, hey, you've got this prosecutor, this special prosecutor with an unlimited budget. His name is Jack Smith, and he's been investigating this for like almost 2 years now, right? And there's been tons of investigators and tons of arrests. Can you please tell me, of the 1,000 people who were arrested for January 6th and the investigation into Donald Trump, please tell me, friend, how many of them have been arrested and charged with insurrection? In fact, specifically Donald Trump, you've got the special prosecutor with an unlimited budget and he's able to subpoena and look into anything. He's brought charges against Donald Trump. Did he bring insurrection charges? Of course, the answer is zero. None. Not a one of them. Not one of the 1,000 people who were arrested for January 6th and Donald Trump. None of them have actually been charged with insurrection. Do you know why? Because there wasn't an insurrection. And everybody knows it, except for these idiots. except for these idiots and the Democrats who are continuing to try to divide us and throw gasoline on this fire because it was their fate. They keep saying, oh, it was such an awful day. No, they loved January 6th. It was the greatest day in the world for them because they didn't have to have the conversation about what happened in Pennsylvania when the unelected Secretary of State upended what the state legislature had determined on the proper handling of mail-in and absentee ballots. They loved the fact that they never had to confront that and discuss what happened in that election. Did Joe Biden win the 2020 election? Well, under the guise of the rules that were laid out and the procedures that were determined for the 2020 election, yes, Joe Biden was definitely declared the winner. And that's as far as I'll say about what happened on Election Day in 2020. Hopefully you can read between those lines to see exactly what did happen. And don't forget one other thing. One of the biggest concerns and biggest issues and biggest challenges the Trump team had with regard to the 2020 election was the handling, verification, and counting of absentee ballots. We had more absentee ballots in 2020 than we had ever had in our history. And why? Because of the pandemic. Why did we have all of those absentee ballots? Because of the pandemic? Because it was determined that social distancing rules precluded people from going and standing in line and voting like they normally would. And where did those social distancing rules come from? According to Anthony Fauci, he has no idea. They just showed up one day. Who determined that we had to be separated by 6 feet to protect ourselves for the pandemic? Anthony Fauci has no idea. No idea the origin of that. The single rule that forced all those absentee ballots that are so in question from the 2020 election, that rule materialized out of nowhere. These are facts. Look it up. But yeah, absolutely. Based on all of those conditions, based on the rules that were laid forth and how they were determined in certain states, yep, Joe Biden was declared the winner. All right, so why are they focused on this so much? Why is January 6th such a major thing for them? Because they're in big, big trouble. Super duper big, big trouble. Take a look.
All right, so party ID nationally. You go to October, November of 2016, Democrats had a 3-point advantage. You go 4 years ago, Democrats had a 6-point advantage. Look at where we are today, Manu. Republicans with a 1-point advantage. A very different picture, very much mirroring what we see in the party registration numbers in those key battleground states and Pennsylvania in particular.
It actually just shows you too why Harris is doing what she's trying to do. She's trying to moderate a little bit on these issues, trying to reach those very voters because the party registration is changing and the demographics of the voters are changing. Those are the people she needs to attract.
Absolutely. And you know, the GOP leads by a point in party identification right now. The average when the Republican Party loses is the Democrats ahead by 8. When the Republican Party wins, the average party ID advantage for Democrats is 3. Republicans right now, Manu, are doing even better than the average when they win. If there's one little nugget that I think Republicans are really hopeful for, it's this party ID and this party registration data. It really points in a good direction for them and for Donald Trump.
All right, couple things here. First of all, I hope you see the sub-headline there. GOP leads 1 point in party identification. A rare GOP edge in presidential elections since 1984. Republicans have not led nationally in party identification in polls since 1984, which, by the way, Ronald Reagan won that election 49 states to 1. It was the biggest landslide since 1972, with Richard Nixon winning every state except for Massachusetts. That's huge, right? And this whole idea where the anchor here on CNN says, well, that explains why Kamala Harris is trying to appeal to Republicans because she wants to. Let me tell you something. If over the last 4 years you've gone from Democrat to Republican, you're not inclined to vote for Kamala Harris as a registered Republican. You left the Democrat Party because of what Kamala Harris has been doing. So that strategy ain't going to work. Also, very, very important. A lot of these Republicans, the new registrations, right? You've never registered to vote before, so now you're registering as a Republican, and that's moving these numbers up. Those Republicans do not show up in the polls. The polls of likely voters, they determine who a likely voter is based on asking a few questions. Did you vote in the primaries? Did you vote in the last election? Did you vote in the election before that? Based on that criteria, they determine whether you're a likely voter or not. If you're a newly registered voter and you've never voted in a presidential election, the pollster's going to hang up on you because they're only looking for likely voters. And based on the way they determine who a likely voter is, if you're a new registry, you're not a likely voter because you've never voted before. So all of those brand new registered Republican are not showing up in any of your polls. That said, Gallup, who has done this new party identification poll, Gallup has determined that now, for the first time since 1984, majority of Americans identify as Republican over Democrat. They have now extrapolated that to the battleground states. And what you're about to see is extraordinary. If you extrapolate that party identification number to where we are in the battleground states and the Electoral College map, that's what election night looks like. With that swing of Republican voters. That's an absolute blowout. Take a look. You've got Minnesota going Republican. You've got Nevada going Republican. You've got New Hampshire going Republican. You've got Maine going Republican. If that party ID then gets extrapolated into how people vote in those very, very close states. Look at how the numbers break down. You get Maine by just 1%, New Hampshire 1.4%, Minnesota 1%. But some of these battleground states, look at this: Wisconsin 7.5 points, Arizona 7 points, Pennsylvania 6 points. That's too big to rig, my friends. And that's why they're panicked. Every single data point that's coming through right now in the polls, and especially understand that these polls notoriously underrepresent Republicans, especially Trump voters. It's so ugly for them right now. And there's more.
And sometimes there's a trend line that I never noticed before and make me go, whoa. This is one of them, all right? This is the Democratic margin among black men under the age of 45 in presidential elections. You go back to November of 2012, what do you see? You see Obama by 81. Clinton only won him by 63. Then we're all the way down to Biden last time around by 53. A tremendous drop already. And then you take a look at the average of the most recent polls, and Kamala Harris is up by only 41 points. That is about half the margin that Obama won them by back in November of 2012. And this, I think, is, when Barack Obama goes in last week when he was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, essentially talking to young black men, he made it seem like it was a Kamala Harris specific problem. This is part of a long-standing trend of young black men moving away from the Democratic Party, and Kamala Harris is just the latest to face that magnitude of younger black men going towards the Republicans.
That was most interesting here is the trend line and where some of the biggest drops happen or already happen.
That's right. The trend line is important there as you see it. Also, listen, is this election going to be determined by black men between the ages of 18 and 44? Well, maybe, maybe not. I can tell you that some of the higher population centers that represent black men 18 to 44 are places like Detroit in the state of Michigan, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in the state of Pennsylvania, Atlanta in the state of Georgia. Those states sound familiar to you? This is why you saw Barack Obama mobilized last week to try to juice up this vote among black men. Of course, the way he did it is not going to help because he started lecturing them and calling them sexist for not voting for her, which is kind of funny because they voted for Hillary. So what is it about Kamala Harris? Maybe they're finally starting to see that the policies are harming them. Maybe. But there's more here. More trouble for Democrats. Good stuff.
In this case, how about black men overall?
How about black men overall? It's part of the same picture. We're looking once again at younger black men. It looks like the worst Democratic performance since 1960, since JFK versus Richard Nixon. It's the same thing among black men overall. Again, part of a similar trend, but here actually the drop-off isn't as dramatic, right? Barack Obama won him by 85. Then you see 71 with Clinton, 69. Biden, basically the same thing, holding steady. But here, again, very, very weak. Only a 54-point margin. Now, again, still winning him by a large margin, but considerably lower than what we're used to. Certainly considerably lower what we had during the Obama years. The bottom line is Kamala Harris with younger black men and then black men overall putting in historically weak performance for a Democratic candidate.
Is she getting any relief with black women?
All right. So, we're talking about the trend line, right? And black women, look, she's doing better with black women than she is doing among black men. But here, there isn't a trend line almost until we get to Kamala Harris. So again, this is a black margin among black women. Look, Obama won him by 93, very large margin. Clinton won him by 93, a very large margin. Biden did a little bit worse at 85. But then you look here, and you get a 71-point margin. Now, again, these are large margins, but the bottom line is when you're talking about the base of the Democratic Party, you would think that Kamala Harris would do very well among black women based upon history. And of course, she would be the first black woman president, but she's actually doing the worst for a Democratic candidate among black women since 1960, if this holds, John.
And again, when you look at the numbers here, whenever you come in, looking at the trends is probably the most important thing.
You got it, my friend.
Thank you very much.
The worst performance among black voters, men and women, since 1960. And by the way, there's another way of phrasing that, which they'll never bring themselves to say, but I'll say it for you. Donald Trump is poised to have the greatest performance of any politician, any Republican politician since 1960 for black men and black women. See, that's really the story here. I know they want to talk about what a terrible candidate she is, and I love talking about what a terrible candidate she is because she's a terrible candidate. And this is what they get for the coup that they engineered. They never went through a primary process. They never went through a vetting process. So they deserve to have a lousy candidate, and she deserves to lose horribly. But the real message here is after nearly 10 years of telling African-American voters that Donald Trump was racist, that he was a Klansman, that he was Hitler, that he hates black people, that he's going to do whatever he can to resegregate and institute, horrific hate crimes against black people after Charlottesville, after saying that he supports the Klan and white nationalists and the Confederacy and all of these things, after that relentless line of attack, Donald J. Trump is poised to have the greatest electoral performance of any Republican since 1960. That's the headline you won't see. You'll only see Kamala Harris is doing poorly. One more poll. NBC News. This is the result of their current poll for the national popular vote. Now, of course, we don't pay attention to the national popular vote much here because it's meaningless. That's not how we elect presidents. We elect them state by state. But this is trouble for Democrats. A Republican has not won the presidency with the national popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. And before that, the last one to do it was his dad in 1988. In other words, only two presidents since 1988, Republicans, have won the Electoral College and won the popular vote. Trump didn't do it when he won, and Bush didn't do it in 2000. Generally speaking, because California is so overloaded with Democrat votes, as is New York, as is Illinois, that even when a Republican does well in the Electoral College map, he's not going to win the national popular vote. That's why Democrats want to do away with the Electoral College, right? So when a Republican is tied or actually winning the national popular vote or the polls for the national popular vote, it is the biggest of all danger signs for Democrats. Look at where NBC has them right now. It's a dead heat 3 weeks out. And the trend is going in Trump's favor. More on this NBC poll, by the way. In the two-way race, yes, Trump has gained 4 points, and now it's tied 48-48. But look at the full field of all the candidates. When you add RFK Jr., who is still on the ballot in some states, and Jill Stein and this libertarian Oliver, he actually is beating Kamala Harris 47-46. Absolute devastation. Kamala Harris is in big, big trouble, my friends. And who's to blame for it? Well, just about an hour ago on The View, Sunny Hostin explained exactly who's to blame for Kamala Harris's performance. And I know you would probably think it's Kamala Harris. Maybe you would think it was Joe Biden's economic policies. Maybe you would think that it was the Democrats for making this entire campaign about Donald Trump instead of actually a positive message for American voters. You'd be wrong. No, Sunny Hostin knows who's really to blame for Kamala Harris doing so poorly.
Look, I think that Kamala Harris has been running a flawless campaign, and that's why she raised billions of dollars, $1 billion. I think it's because of the momentum that she has. I think it's because people believe in her, and I think people are showing that by the amount of money that they're willing to give to the campaign. I think we have the press to blame for a lot of this. About, Whoopi, you always say you don't believe in polls. I'm with you now, because I'm reading the press. First, it was Kamala's not doing enough press. Then she goes on this huge press tour. She was here with us. I thought she was fantastic. She was energetic. The crowd went wild. It was electric. CNN, Democrats go anxious. Axios, blue wall blues. Fox, Dems are scared to death. No, Dems are not scared to death. Dems are pumped. What I would like the press to talk a little bit more about is Trump is in hiding. He didn't do the 60 Minutes interview. He does not want to do another debate. He's in mental decline. Obama's speech was captivating in Pittsburgh, yet instead of talking about that, we're talking about what he said before the speech to black men. I think that the media has to do a much better job than what they're doing.
Yeah, you heard it right. The reason why Kamala Harris is doing so poorly is because of the mainstream media and their anti-Democrat, anti-Kamala Harris bias. They're in the tank for Trump. I wish I could make this up. I wish I could make this up. And what they really should be thinking about and talking about is how Trump's in hiding. Trump does a rally every other day. Trump sits and does a podcast for 3 hours straight and answers every question that's put to him. He didn't do 60 Minutes. Why? Because we just found out that 60 Minutes deceptively edited their interview with Kamala to make her look less imbecilic and moronic. I mean, he'd be a fool if he sat down with 60 Minutes or any other media outlet. But no, Donald Trump is in hiding. This is glorious. Are you not having a great day? This is a great thing to behold and witness, but we're not complacent. We're not confident even. We're hopeful. We're optimistic, but we are focused like a freaking laser beam. And we're going to stick together, shoulder to shoulder, holding hands if we have to, because we will not break this wall. And we're going to march straight forward from today for the next 21 days right up to Election Day.